Radical forgiveness. Radical forgiveness. That's what I sent out this morning in the message. I don't know. It doesn't to me. It doesn't seem that way, but
Is that like extreme?
yeah. Well, now that may be. We'll just see. We'll just see how it all comes out. Um, well, here, this is what the dictionary says about it. It says this actually it says at the beginning. It says simple definition. Simple definition. To stop feeling anger toward, and then parenthetically it says someone who has done something wrong. To stop blaming someone. To stop feeling angry about something. To forgive someone for, and then again parenthetically it says something wrong. And finally, to stop requiring payment. So that's this is what the dictionary says. So here's the generally speaking, when we hear about forgiveness, it's kind of thought to be like a magnanimous act, where and people will even say this to you. You be the better person. You take the higher road. You be the better example or whatever. And I think that's okay on the surface. I mean, I guess it's better than the alternative to just be aggressive and angry and carrying it around. But it really isn't forgiveness the way we have come to know it. Because when it's us saying I'm going to take the higher road, that really means in one way or another that I'm taking the superior road. I'm going to be the better person means that's how I'm thinking to myself. Well, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better than this other person, and I'm going to and again, I mean, that may be better as far as our actions in the world. It may be better than being a worse person. For the results, but actually, for our own inner well-being, it's not that helpful. And it actually says in this definition in the next paragraph, it says that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And so and we know how many times have we heard it. Well, I'm going to forgive them, but I'm not going to forget it. I'll never forget it. Well, here's the problem with never forgetting is that then that means I got to carry that burden around. I got to carry that burden of remembering all these offenses around with me. So what I'm going to suggest, and I have before, is this more radical idea that true forgiveness is actually forgetting. That it means that I'm not going to replay the offense over and over again in my mind. That I am going to. So then we've been talking about this particular how this happens for years here, and the thing is that I've had people come back to me and say, I'm just really terrible at this forgiveness stuff. Because I keep remembering. I'll forget for a minute, but then they'll do something else. And then I remember that other stuff that they did. And so how we deal with that is we just forget again. It's okay. It's okay. So it comes to mind. All that means is when it comes to mind, I don't want to hold on to it. I want to recognize, okay, it came up again. There it is. It came up again. Now, let me just let it go. I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to stop feeling anger. See, and the definition works really well, but these parenthetical statements are the thing that get in the way. Because in order for me to do what it actually says in the definition, I have to assign blame to someone. I have to say, I'm going to forgive. I'm going to stop being angry at you for doing that thing. Now, something really important about this is that this idea of forgiving and forgetting, going together, does not mean that we are saying that it was okay that whatever behavior the person did. Because that's actually the same thing, I mean, at the other end of the spectrum, but it's the same thing as saying it wasn't okay. It's making it real, it makes it more real in our minds when we say, so if I say, oh, that's all right, but it's not. So the answer here is, instead of saying that's all right or that's not all right, the answer and the attitude is it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything. To just be, and you know yourself that you've had this experience in the past where there will be some slight, someone will say something, someone will do something, and it doesn't even make an impact on you. It's like nothing. It's like nothing happened. Whereas on another day, under pressure, when a bunch of other things may have occurred, somebody does or says the same type of thing, and all of a sudden it's a big deal. So if we already know how it feels. I remember we were taking a guy to a meeting one night, and we're driving and we're talking about recovery. And I was driving, and somebody just cut straight in front of me, and then across the lane in front of the person that was next to me. And it didn't even, like, I saw him, I didn't hit him, but it didn't even register with me that something was wrong. Now, it had something to do with the state of mind I was in. I was in the state of mind of giving service. I was in the state of mind of sharing unconditional positive regard, right? So that was my state of mind. Well, the passenger, the guy who we were taking to the meeting, he got all upset. He was like really mad about what just happened. What's wrong with him? You know, all this, you know how it goes. And on another day, I could have been the one that got really mad. But I noticed that my state of mind changed the whole thing. And I actually felt like, the feeling was, all I can say is the feeling was, it was nothing. Nothing really happened except a car moved from here to here, and nobody got hit. There were no consequences except, and this is important, no consequences except the consequences in our mind. So in my mind, there was nothing. In my passenger's mind, there was a consequence, and the consequence was his suffering. Because the guy who cut across, he didn't hear all this yelling that was going on about what was wrong with him. It didn't impact him whatsoever. Now there is some thought, and I kind of go along with it, that anytime we put a disturbance out into the atmosphere, that everybody feels it somewhat. But generally speaking, the driver of the car didn't know anything, right? Who knows what was going on in his mind? So this repeats over and over again. So this is this key to forgiveness. Forgiveness is actually not denying that an event occurred. It's recognizing it, accepting that this event occurred, investigate what's going on in the mind. Not necessarily the thing that happened, but what's going on in the mind. And then to say to ourselves, that's not me. That's not mine. I don't own that. Whatever. So it's what the Buddhists would call non-identification is the idea. So then, and to realize, once we recognize and accept, we realize that that event played differently in our mind than it did in the mind of someone else who may have been witnessing it. If something occurs, every single person will have a different story about what happened. Think Ryan Lochte. So here's a perfect example of forgiveness for us, all right? Now, at first, the forgiveness in the story was that we should forgive whoever it was that accosted him and his friends and pointed a gun at them and robbed them and all of that. That was our first task. When the story is first reported, and I don't know, if you don't know the story, Google it. You'll see there's plenty. So anyway, anyway, so that's the story at first. So then so our forgiveness there would be, okay, so we understand, now we're getting a secondhand story about something else that happened, and we think about everything around the story, the backstory about how the streets in Rio are dangerous and how the Olympic planners really didn't do their job, how, and all this, there's just a myriad of stories, like there's tens of thousands of people that were displaced out of their homes, and that all the economic benefit is not going to actually help the lower class people. I mean, all these stories get all mixed up in the head, and you hear this and you go, see, should have never had those Olympics down there. So okay, so and then you go, and you knew already that the police there were corrupt. I mean, this is the whole flavor of it, right? The whole, and that may well be the case, but in any event, then we find out that it's not quite like it was reported. The story's not quite like it was reported, and you say, oh, and then you look, and Ryan has his hair bleached totally white, and you may have some ideas about what that means about his character, right? So all these things are happening in the mind, and we're making these judgments, one after another, based on some opinions that we had, and some other opinions that other people had that they foisted off onto us. And a lot of times we don't even notice how they're just cascading, how these opinions are just cascading. Then it turns out that the story was totally bogus, and that what had happened was they were all drunk, and that they went into a gas station and really were kind of bullying people around in the gas station. They vandalized the bathroom. They got a shot of Ryan urinating in the bushes. So then all of this stuff comes, and then now you're mad because, he has misled us. Right? Now he's the villain, and he has misled us. And of course, what comes to mind about all of this stuff is, well, there needs to be consequence. There needs to be something needs to be done. He should be stripped of his medals. He should be, and all this craziness comes to mind. Doesn't it? In any event. So then he comes on TV last night with Matt Lauer, and his hair's no longer bleached blonde. He looks very presentable. All of a sudden, man, he's just got this looks, a very, very preppy type kind of a haircut, and he's quite circumspect and regretful. He doesn't actually he took responsibility in a way. In any event, this whole thing. See, and now we think, if you were watching the whole thing, now you think, now I know what really happened. Now we know the real story. And we have some opinions about what should happen now that we know the real story. We don't. We don't know the real story. We know what all's been said. And I'm not saying that now people are being dishonest. I'm just saying that every single person has a different opinion about the event. And the opinions have something to do with their own, whatever they're invested in their own mind, their own beliefs, whatever they've got going on. Now, I will say that it's bad, that it is unfortunate behavior. It is for sure, we know that there was some behavior that given a second chance, they may not have participated in. But what's the motivation? What happened? What was going on in their minds? Well, first, something was going on in their minds. They were drunk. This is the first thing. Now, see, when I say that, many of us here have some opinions about that. Probably all have some opinions about that. So, so we can just go round and round with this whole thing. But the reason I told this whole story, and in each one of these events as they happen, when I said it to you, I'm telling you that each one of us had a different reaction and a different set, maybe not real far apart, but not the same. And that's why forgiveness is a solid principle. Forgiving and forgetting is a solid principle that we can practice, is because we cannot rely on our own opinions. I'm just going to tell you, our thinking is suspect. Our thoughts are influenced by thoughts that have come before in the meditation. What did we say? We said in the meditation that every belief that we have plants seeds. Every thought that we have plants a seed for the next thought. And so the thinking itself is suspect. And you think, oh, I'm a very clear thinking person. But the fact of the matter is, we react in our minds as these visions come to us, as we see what's happening in the world, we have reactions. And those reactions are based on what's going on right now, in my experience right now. So again, if I've had a bad day, my reaction, I've had a bad day, I come home and look at the news after I've been following this story and see he's now up there confessing to, really lying. And I had a bad day. I said, "Oh, and go off. There should be some kind of punishment. If I've had a good day and I've been focused on service, I'm going to look at him and I'm going to say, there's something going on in his mind. Here's suffering. There's suffering, and you say, oh, he's a privileged kid. You look, he's living. He's at his parents' house. Looks great. He's got a bright future. Well, maybe not as bright as it was, but and so he's not suffering. He's living a life of luxury. It doesn't have anything to do with the suffering that goes on in the mind. We have no idea. We actually have no idea what has occurred with this guy throughout his life. We don't know. And but see, here again, we can have opinions. We can say, oh, his parents may have pushed him really hard to get him to perform like this, and who knows what kind of craziness went on around that. They could be living vicariously through him. So again, here come the opinions. They come rushing in. But here's what we know. Here's what we know for sure and what we can rely on in our thinking. There's only two things going on. Either we are giving love or we are afraid. Those only two things are going on. Fear is happening. We are either caught in a thought system of fear or we are in the thought system of love. And so it's obvious when this kind of thing happens, there's all kinds of fear stuff going on in his mind. And again, when we hear the story and react, however we react, that's all kinds of fear stuff in our mind. So here we come to the crux of this forgiveness. The forgiveness is realizing that that cause and effect is in operation. And so when something unfortunate happens, it always comes out of suffering. I mean, when I say that, I mean when something unfortunate happens that someone else put into motion. Not just chance random events, but when someone else does something and it turns into a disaster or a tragedy or maybe just some minor irritation, it begins with suffering. It came out of fear. And so from that perspective, then now we can say, all right, so this is the basis. This is where it comes from. It comes from suffering. So now, here is where we decide whether we're going to be superior people or whether we're going to be equal people, right? This is why forgiveness is a gift between equals, true forgiveness, a gift between equals. So when we see that someone was suffering, this can just be, oh, you know what? They were suffering. We need to get them help. We need to do whatever. And this is like being socially responsible to do this. But if we're doing it from a position that we're up here and they're down here, and we are reaching down to help pull them out of the gutter, we miss the point for our own well-being. When we realize that the fact of the matter is, in the material world, in these bodies that we have decided to inhabit, here's the radical part that I'm going to say. Some people may be offended, I hope not. But I just want to say that we are all capable of anything. Given the right circumstances and motivation, each and every one of us, we're capable of anything. Anything that's already happened, anything. So from that perspective, now I'm starting to get more on equal level. Yes, I didn't do it, and I've been, maybe because I thought things through or whatever, I've been able to not avoid that particular kind of behavior. But the fact of the matter is I'm capable. Once I see that I'm capable of any of this kind of behavior, then I can say, yes, any of us could do it. Now, the other thing that we're equal in is the ability to transcend the fear, the ability to alleviate the suffering, the ability to be able to move beyond being caught up in all this fear-based activity. All of us are equal in that. So for true forgiveness, what it does is It relieves the person of the role that we've assigned them to. We may say they assigned themselves to that role. They're the ones that were the bad actor, right? But the fact of the matter is, as soon as we saw that they were a bad actor, that's the role we assigned, because that was our opinion. So our opinions are the roles that we're assigning to people. So forgiveness is forgiving that role and seeing that that person can be free of suffering, and therefore, so can we. And so we forget. We say it wasn't anything. It was nothing. It's done. Nothing really happened. Now, here's where it gets a little bit harder. When something happens in the world where people are injured, maybe even killed, then it's like it's a whole different thing. Now this whole thing is just turned into a terrible disaster, and there's you can't say that it wasn't anything because the person died. Well, the reason that I can say, and listen, again, I don't want to say that I want to be like, it's okay. What I want to say is, in reality, in the ultimate reality of spirit, it was nothing. Because even though it looked like a body died, I'm not a body. You are not a body. So when you go, oh no, that can't be right, then we can't just go around excusing these people. We're not excusing, because consequences will occur. Cause and effect is in operation in the material world. So if someone dies, there's going to be consequences. So forgiveness doesn't mean relieving someone of the consequences of their actions. Consequences occur. What forgiveness means is I'm not going to hold it against them. I'm not going to be mad at them. I'm going to let them off the hook as far as in my own mind is what I'm doing. The natural consequences of the event are still the natural consequences. So now, when we start to practice this idea of forgiveness, we have to actually look and see if the consequences that we are assigning are actually appropriate. That's another responsibility of society, is to look at what we're doing with people. Because if we're not looking at the underlying causes of the problems and trying to alleviate that, all we're doing is warehousing people in prisons. This is no good. First of all, I'm just going to tell you from a purely fiscal point of view, it's irresponsible use of public funds. It's tremendously expensive to keep all these people in prison that really should be being really rehabilitated, really being healed. So whatever the situation is, forgiveness just says, I'm going to love you. I'm going to love you. Because if I can't, if I'm looking at you and seeing your behavior as being so beyond the pale that I can't extend love to you, that means that I'm caught in fear. And this is really what the Course says about this, is that I cannot leave anybody out of my love, because if I do, I will leave myself out. So we allow consequences to happen. Here's what, I'll just read you this piece here. I hope it kind of. Forgiveness recognizes that what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. Now, simply put, psychologically put, the way you saw it, it didn't happen. So you accept that something happened, but the way you saw it, it wasn't real. Because your opinion was clouded by other things, okay? So forgiveness does not pardon sins and make them real. It sees that there was no sin. And in that view, are all your sins forgiven? What is sin except a false idea about God's Son? Forgiveness merely sees it as falsity and therefore lets it go. What then is free to take place is now the will of God. So all this is saying is, all these sins that we observe, it's just the material world which we created. We created this system. We created this scenario. Or you could say, we are the director of this movie. And so then in reality, in eternity, in spirit, it didn't really happen. It happened in your mind. It happened in what the Course would say, your small mind. So then it says, an unforgiving thought is one which makes a judgment that it will not raise to doubt, although it is not true. So a judgment that the mind refuses to look at, it refuses to investigate. As I said, we recognize, accept, investigate. A judgment is the judgment that is non-forgiving will not raise itself to the mind for investigation to see whether it's actually real or not. The mind is closed and will not be released. The thought protects projection, tightens its chain so that distortions are more veiled and more obscure, less easily accessible to doubt, and further kept from reason. These judgments trigger emotions, and the emotions chain us to our opinion and try to keep us from actually looking at what's happening so that we can see if it really is logical and makes sense. An unforgiving thought does many things. In frantic action, it pursues its goals, twisting and overturning what it sees as interfering with its chosen path. Distortion is its purpose, and the means by which it would accomplish it as well. It sets about its furious attempts to smash reality. Reality here is that we are all one in God, that we've never been separated, and we're just having this crazy fantasy about being separate, without concern for anything that would appear to pose a contradiction to its point of view. So here's what it says forgiveness is. On the other hand, is still. Forgiveness is still and quiet. It does nothing. It offends no aspect of reality nor seeks to twist it into appearances it likes. It merely looks. Forgiveness merely looks and waits and judges not. He who would not forgive must judge, for he must justify his failure to forgive. But he who would forgive himself must learn to welcome truth exactly as it is. So here's this final paragraph, really kind of sets the whole stage for this. It says, do nothing then. Do nothing. Stop the thought train. Stop the process. Do nothing then, and let forgiveness show you what to do. So just stop. Be quiet for a second. Allow Spirit to speak. And when I say allow Spirit to speak, I'm saying allow love to speak. He who is your guide, the Holy Spirit, your Savior and protector, strong in hope and certain of your ultimate success. He has forgiven you already, for such is his function, given him by God. Now must you share his function and forgive whom he has saved, whose sinlessness he sees, and whom he honors as the Son of God. So this is talking about a forgiveness that totally is the amnesia of all of the problems, of all of the shortcomings, of all of the disasters, of this total wiping out and seeing that we are all one in God. It says, do nothing. You don't have to interfere. You don't have to interfere with it. Do nothing but just be loving. Be love. Be who you really are, and see that your brother, your sister,